Hey guys, it's Amélie, and today I'm gonna talk about the best and worst books that I've read in 2018. I feel like 2018 was kind of a meh year when it comes to books. I read some pretty great books at the beginning of the year, but most of the books that made it to my worst books of 2018 are books that I've read in the second half of the year. So overall, I'd say that 2018 was kind of disappointing book-wise. I've read some pretty great books, but nothing that really stood out to me. I have read a few because otherwise there would be no point to this video. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it. So to make this a little bit more fun, I decided to divide the books that I've read into different categories. So we'll have the best, the worst, and everything in between. So our first category is best debut, and I had to give it to The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. I cannot believe that I've read this book in 2018. It feels like forever ago to me, but The Hate You Give was one of the most powerful books that I've read in 2018. I absolutely loved it. Basically, we're following our main character, Star Carter, who is kind of caught between two worlds. On one hand, she lives in this poor suburban neighborhood, but she goes to this fancy prep school, which means that she's kind of torn between her black heritage and the fact that she goes to school with these rich white people. But her world turns upside down when her childhood best friend Khalil gets killed by a police officer while Khalil was unharmed. Basically, the book is following the aftermath of that event, and it shows how Star reacted to it and how it changed her world, but also how it affected everyone around her. This book was so powerful, especially considering the fact that it's a subject matter that we see in the news every single day. Sadly, this is something that happens, and I feel like it was necessary. This book should be a required reading, in my opinion, for everyone. I remember reading this and being completely flabbergasted because it felt so real and so raw, and I couldn't fathom the idea that people actually lived this. But it is something that happens. But what made this book so great, in my opinion, is the characters. Every single character that Angie Thomas wrote in her book felt so real and vivid in my mind. I could imagine every single one of them, and I love how different and complex each character was. And each character is intricately linked to the success of this story. The story wouldn't be the same if it wasn't for all the characters. These characters just found their way into my heart. I couldn't recommend it enough. If you guys haven't read it already, highly recommend you check it out. There has been a movie adaptation which I haven't seen yet, but apparently this one is also really great. So just check it out, you won't regret it. The next category is best poetry, and I didn't really read any poetry collections this year. I've only read one, and it was so good that I had to like give it its own category, and that one is Milk and Honey by Rupi Kaur. Oh my god, you guys, I really like this. I was really surprised. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea. It's modern poetry, and like some of these poems are like super short. But I just love the way this book was made, like these illustrations. To me, it felt completely out of this world how Rupi Kaur could convey such powerful messages with so little words. I still cannot understand how these poems could affect me the way that they did. And like I said, I know some people don't like this because it's just like sentences that are weirdly cut, I guess. But I really like this, and I bought the second one, and I cannot wait to dive into it. So the next category is best nonfiction, and this year I read some great nonfiction books. I found my favorite. I had to give it to Mindy Kaling's Is Everyone Hanging Out Without Me and Other Concerns. I bought both of Mindy Kaling's books. She has a second one that is called Why Not Me, and this one is much better in my opinion. It really goes into how she started her career as an actress and like screenwriter. If you didn't know, Mindy Kaling played in The Office and in The Mindy Project, but she's also the writer behind The Office and The Mindy Project, and The Mindy Project is one of my absolute favorite TV shows, so I had to read her book, and I just thought it was done in such a way that I could really relate to it. Even though I'm not an actress, I'm not a screenwriter, I just thought that this was so interesting to read about because it really dives into how she started up and where it led her and how it impacted her and everything that she's been through, and I really enjoyed it. Honestly, I thought it was such a fun read, and if you're looking for something inspiring and funny, you should definitely check this one out. The next category is best sequel, and I feel like sequel get a bad rep for being not as good as the first book, and that happens a lot, but this specific sequel was so much better than the first one in my opinion, and I had to give it to A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J Maas. So this is the second book in the Court of Thorns and Roses series by Sarah J Maas. and this one was so good, you guys. Like I said, I loved it more than the first one. For those of you who are not familiar with A Court of Thorns and Roses, it is kind of a Beauty and the Beast retelling where our main character Farah kills a wolf, or what she thinks is a wolf, only to find out that it was a fae. To make up for the fact that she killed a fae, she's taken away by a lord and she has to live there. Basically, kind of like Beauty and the Beast, there's a curse involved at some point, and yeah, I really enjoyed the first one, but this one was so much better in my opinion, and I think it's mostly due to the fact that the cast of character is slightly different. We still have our characters from the first book, but Farah is mostly involved with other characters, and I think I like them more than the characters in the first book, which is why I loved it so much. I also loved how Farah became this powerful and independent woman at the end of this one. Like, she really went through a lot in the sequel. Like, she started off being completely broken at the beginning of A Court of Mist and Fury, and you see her grow and evolve into this powerful, confident young woman at the end of A Court of Mist and Fury. And of course, the romance in this one is probably why I enjoyed it so much. I loved it. I have no words to describe it besides it was the best one in the series. In the same order of idea, the next category is Best Finale, and I had to give it to Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. This is the second book in the Six of Crows duology, and oh my god, you guys, this one was so good. Basically, we're following these characters who are going on a heist. Basically, they're all kind of bad people, but they all have this special power that makes them valuable and that makes them the best team ever to go through this heist. So this is the second book, so it's taking place after the heist, and it was so good. I cannot believe this, and I love this so much. These characters, they're my babies. I love this series with my entire being, and I don't want to spoil it, so I won't talk about it too much, but it was so good. Everything that I could have hoped for and more. And now I found out that there's a third book in the series that's being written and is coming out eventually, and I'm just so happy. But it was a great finale. Like, even if we hadn't learned that there was going to be a third book in the series, I would have been really happy with the way things ended in this one. The next category is Most Surprising, and I had to give it to Modern Romance and Investigation by Aziz Ansari. So the reason why I was so surprised by this book is that I bought this on Audible thinking that it would be like a fun nonfiction book, kind of like Mindy Kaling's book about Aziz Ansari, but talking about like his love life and just talking about his career and everything, kind of like your standard nonfiction book for a like comedian slash actor. But this one was so good. It's actually a, like the title says, an investigation on romance in the modern era. So basically, Aziz Ansari and his team, because there are people that were helping him carry this investigation, they did a lot of research on romance and how it changed throughout the ages, like how the modern technology, the modern world affected romance. So I just thought it was so interesting. It felt like reading a research paper, but one I was actually interested in, and I would highly recommend the audiobook if you're going to read this. Yes, you're not going to see the graphs and everything, because sometimes they're like statistics and stuff that Aziz Ansari talks about and that you cannot see, but it was narrated in a way that made it super interesting to read about, and I just love the audiobook. Aziz Ansari narrates it, so of course it's funny, and I don't know, I was really intrigued, and I ended up being super surprised because it was really different from what I was expecting, and I loved it. It's one of my favorite audiobooks that I've read this year. I'm not a big audiobook person, but this one was so interesting, and I just highly recommend you check it out. Now we're gonna start talking about some books that I did not like. First, worst category is Most Disappointing, and this one is Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. I already talked about this book in my November reading wrap-up, if I remember correctly, so I won't talk about it too much here because I've already ranted a lot about this book, but I will leave a link up on the screen for you to watch if you haven't seen my November reading wrap-up. But basically, Spinning Silver is it's marketed as a retelling of Rumpelstiltskin, even though to me it didn't feel like one. But basically, we're following this main character, Miriam, I think her name is. Her father is kind of like the broker in the village, but her father is doing a poor job at it. Her family is super poor, but eventually Miriam decides that this is enough, and she starts to take her father's place and runs the business in his place. Her world is completely shattered when she is taken away by this, I want to say fae, but I'm not sure it's fae, but this like kind of fae-like creature, and I did not like this one. I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars, and I was so disappointed because everyone said that it was so good. I did not like it. All the female characters, I love the idea of like female empowerment because all of the females in this book were super empowered and like powerful, but they felt so bland to me. I could not differentiate them. I don't know why. I just, like, I know they had a different name, but that's pretty much the only thing that made them different. So I don't know, I just did not like this. I felt like the story was kind of boring. It's a very flowery writing style and like not much goes on, and I don't know, I was not a fan. Next category is best romance, and I have to admit that I had a hard time picking just one book. I feel like I read a lot of cute contemporaries and like romance novels this year, and there were a few that could have made it to best romance this year. But I have to give it to my favorite, which is The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue by Mackenzie Lee. So this one is not really like a romance novel per se. It's actually a YA contemporary. I'd say contemporary, but it's historical fiction. It takes place in the 17th, if I remember correctly, century, and it's so much fun. There's magic involved, that's important. So I guess it's like kind of magical realism. I don't know why I said contemporary because it's not a contemporary. But nonetheless, I really loved the pairing in this one. Percy and Monty are so cute. Oh, my heart. I love them so much with all of my being. It was so much fun. This one is also really funny. It is kind of a thick one, but it goes so fast and the story is so entertaining. I loved it. It was really different from what I was expecting, but in a good way. I absolutely loved it. Highly recommend to check it out if you haven't already. I haven't read this companion novel yet, but this one was just amazing, and these characters, they're so cute. I was rooting for them since the beginning, and I'm so glad. Like, I knew they were gonna end up together, but like, nonetheless, they were just like so amazing. Next category is new favorite author, and I decided to create this category because there was an author that I discovered this year, and I read most of her work in 2018 and absolutely loved everything that I read from her. So instead of like mentioning each and every single one of her books, I'm just gonna talk about this author, and it is Katie Cattaneo, who wrote 99 Days and 9 Days and 9 Nights. So I read most of Katie Cattaneo's work in 2018. Like I said, I read maybe one of her books in 2017, which made me want to check out her other books. But I fell in love with her work. Like, everything that I've read from her is absolutely incredible. There's one book that I read that I did not like as much, but overall I just really like what she writes. It's my new favorite contemporary author. Honestly, I love everything that she does. This year she came out with 9 Days and 9 Nights, which is a sequel to 99 Days. If you remember, I read 99 Days and then was like, I loved it, but the main character got on my nerves like so much. She was annoying as hell. But in this one, she's actually bearable, and this one takes place in Europe, and you guys know that I have this, well, I don't know if you were aware, but I have this soft spot for books that are like YA travel novels. So I love this one so much. Highly recommend you check Katie Cattaneo out. I have bought other of her books. I think there's one of hers that I haven't read yet. I bought it. I cannot wait to read it, and I would highly recommend you check out Katie Cattaneo's work. Next category is best new release, and I'll be honest, I didn't read that many new releases in 2018. I bought a lot, but I did not end up reading all of them. I guess I was catching up on other books before I read the new releases, but there's one that completely blew me away, and that was Emergency Contact by Mary H.K. Choi. I feel like I've talked about this book in a reading wrap-up before, and if that's the case, I will leave a link up here. But this one was so great. We're basically following these two main characters. First, we have Penny, who has been living with her mom in this small town of Texas forever, and she cannot wait to go to college to pursue her dream of writing and get away from her mom, we'll be honest. And then we have this other character. His name is Sam, and Sam is in kind of a rut in his life. He is working in this small cafe, and little do you know, he also lives there, and he wants to become a movie director, if I remember correctly. And these two characters meet, and they develop this relationship where they become each other's emergency contact. Basically, they talk over text, they talk on the phone, but they never really meet. They're like the other person's emergency contact, and I highly recommend it. I loved it so much. I know some people did not like it. Personally, I loved it. I read this in like one sitting, or like really quickly. I love the cover also, like so beautiful. Can we talk about that? And yeah, I will check out Mary H.K. Choi's other work because I love this one. Now let's talk worst books. I wanted initially to talk about just one book, but there was another one I had to talk about. But we'll start with the absolute worst book that I read in 2018, and that book is Restore Me by Tara Mafi. So I've already ranted about this book a lot on my channel. You can watch my November reading wrap up if you want to know more, but I hated this book so freaking much. The thing is, I loved the first 3 books in the series. I did a Shatter Me 24-hour readathon. If you want to see my initial reactions and everything, it will be linked up here. But I hated Restore Me so freaking much. I feel like the Shatter Me series in general is more of a romance novel disguised as a dystopian. Don't get me wrong, I don't mind romance novels, but just like give me the romance if that's what you want to give me. Don't pretend that this is going to be a dystopian novel because of this world and the way that it is set up. You have expectations that something's going to happen. You think these teenagers or just these people in general are going to turn the world upside down and just make things right and like fight and, you know, get some action. But actually it's just like drama, teenage drama for like hundreds of pages, and it pisses me off so freaking much. I cannot believe it. No, this is just more teenage drama that is pointless and doesn't bring anything to the book. So no, I will not be reading the rest of the series, and yes, it is the absolute worst book that I've read in 2018. But there was another contender that I haven't really talked about on my channel, and I feel like I needed to talk about it because I really hated it, and that book is Stalking Jack the Ripper by Carrie Maniscalco. So when I picked this up, I thought this is gonna be a spooky read because basically you're following Audrey Rose, who is, as the title suggests, stalking Jack the Ripper. She's working in forensics, and there's these murders happening around town where people get robbed, especially women. They get robbed of their organs with the help of Thomas Cresswell. They go after Jack the Ripper. This one was so bad, you guys. I don't even know where to begin. I love the idea, like the concept and everything, but the execution was absolutely terrible. I couldn't stand it, and the writing was okay. I guess I loved the era it was set in. It's set in the Victorian era, which is my favorite to read about. But I don't know, it was bad. Like, I guessed the outcome from the very beginning, and like that's my main problem with mystery thrillers. I always guess how it's gonna end before I start the book, and I hated the 2 characters with all my being. Like Audrey Rose was fine. Like technically I kind of liked her because, you know, she's this strong independent woman, even though some of the things that she say are kind of like problematic. But Thomas Cresswell, I know a lot of people think he's swoon worthy, but personally I wanted to bang my head against the wall every single time he talked. I feel like these 2 characters, like Audrey Rose and Thomas Cresswell, were pale copies of Sherlock Holmes and John Watson. And while I'm normally all for like Sherlock Holmes retelling, because if you didn't know, I'm a big Sherlock Holmes fan, I did not like this. Thomas Cresswell was just like such a bad Sherlock. Like Audrey Rose is kind of like Dr. Watson because she's the one telling the story. She's like a doctor. So yeah, I did not like this. Would not recommend and will not read the rest of the series. Let's continue with my most problematic reads of 2018. So once again, I had 2 books to talk about. One that I've already talked about on my channel, and another one that I don't think I've mentioned anywhere besides on Goodreads. So the first one is Love, Life, and the List by Casey West. Where do I even begin? I like the concept of this. I like the idea of like having a list of like a bucket list type of thing. It reminded me a lot of Since You've Been Gone, which is why I picked it up in the first place. But then I read this and I was like, okay, this is bad. I think the main reason why I did not like this, actually I know the main reason why I did not like this, is because of the love interest. I never read a contemporary where I hated the love interest so much that I wanted them to die, but this changed when I read Love, Life, and the List. This guy, I don't even remember his name, Cooper, I think, like a dumb name like that. Basically we have these 2 characters, right? So our main character, her name is Abby. Cooper is her best friend, and she has developed feelings for him over time. And when she finally decides to tell him, the douchebag decides to ignore what she said and pretends it never happened. But later on, the worst part is, he makes fun of her for having those feelings. He makes her feel bad for feeling the way that she did. And at the end of the book, he's like, sorry it took me so long to realize that I was in love with you. And I was like, bitch, you made fun of her. You're not in love with her. This love interest was so bad. I did not like him. He was the absolute worst, and I do not recommend this one. Like, I was so disappointed because I love Casey West, but this was just terrible. And then we have the second book that I found to be super problematic, and that one is Beautiful Bastard by Christina Lauren. So this was actually a reread for me. I remember reading this in 2016, like 2 years ago, and I did not love it, but I thought it was fine. But then I reread this after seeing a great review on Goodreads, and I was like, you know what? I feel like reading a office type of romance, and I picked this up because the review was great. But then I did not remember how problematic this book is. The entire story is based on the idea that this character here, the man called Beautiful Bastard, and is in turn, like they ate each other, but they are also secretly into the other one. If it was just that, it would be fine, because I mean, it's not the first time that the boss assistant trope is used in romance novels. But what makes this book so problematic is that consent is never expressed. Bennett Ryan just wants to fuck his intern without asking her if she's into it. It just does it. He just assumes that she wants it to, which she does, but that's besides the point. Bennett, beautiful bastard, uses his position of power several times to touch or have sex with Chloe without asking her if she's okay with it. Also, plot? Don't know her. It's just one sex scene after the other. There's literally nothing happening. There's a bit of drama involved at some point that it's fine, but I want something. Like, I want like meat also. Like, I love the bone, like, but give me the meat. No, you know what I mean? I don't even know if I'm making sense. I just didn't like this. Now let's dive back into books I actually enjoyed. So next category is Best Fantasy, and I had to give it to The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. I read this during the Magical Readathon Christmas at Hogwarts edition, and I was so surprised by this. I didn't know if I was gonna love it because reviews are kind of mixed. People either love it or hate it, but I absolutely loved this. This one was really good. It was so dark and gloomy, which I wasn't expecting. Like, I love the political aspect of this, but it was so, like, these fays are not like the Sarah J Maas ones. They're actually like bad people. You should stay away from them. But it was so interesting to read about. These characters are all super flawed. Like, there's not one likable character in all of this. But nonetheless, you want to read about this and like you want to learn more about them. And this one ends on such a cliffhanger. Like, oh my god. Highly recommend you check it out. The sequel is out. Highly recommend this one too. I have a reading blog for it. Link is up here. And I love this so much. It was the best fantasy I read this year. Next category is Best Graphic Novel, and I've only read one graphic novel this year. I started reading my very first one this year and I fell in love with it, and I had to give it its own category, and that one is Check Please by Ngozi Yukazu. Check Please follows Biddy, our main character, who used to be a figure skater and is now part of a college hockey team, and we're following him as he goes on to college and during his first 2 years, so basically freshman and sophomore year. And I love this so much. It was so cute. The artwork is so pretty. Like, look at this cover, but like even inside, this was absolutely incredible. I really loved it. It made me want to read more graphic novels, and I cannot wait for this second volume to come out. I know it's also available online, but personally I love the bind up of this, and I love this. And Biddy is so cute. Like, he loves to bake, and I don't know, he's just like, he's a vlogger, and I love him, and I love these characters. And I love the way it ended, and oh my god. Next category is a new favorite series, and I had to give it to An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. So this year I read An Ember in the Ashes and A Torch Against the Night, and I absolutely fell in love with this. It is one of my favorite series. I've talked about this on my channel before. We're following these two main characters, Laia and Elias. Laia is pretending to be a slave. She's spying on Elias's mother, and Elias is a mask, which is like kind of a warrior, badass assassin thing. And they meet, and it's so great. It's kind of like Roman Empire inspired, and I loved it so much. Like, the second book is just as good as the first one. I haven't read the third book yet, but I need to. I'm so ready for this, and I just highly recommend this, and it's so good. If you haven't read it, what are you doing? Next we have my favorite middle grade series, and I decided to go with the Villain series by Sabrina Valentino. So I read these as part of my Disney 24-hour readathon, link will be up here, and I discovered this series which I have absolutely fell in love with. So we have these villains, so as you can tell, we have the Evil Queen from Snow White, the Beast from Beauty and the Beast, Ursula from The Little Mermaid, and Maleficent from Sleeping Beauty. And this is so great. It's like backstories, like origin stories on all of our favorite Disney villains, and I loved it so much. I fell in love with this series. They're all linked, so you have to read them in order, but they're all so interesting to read about. I feel like Sabrina Valentino wrote this very dark and gloomy sort of book, but like, it's middle grade, so don't worry, it's not that dark. But I loved it, and my favorite book in the series is most likely Maleficent, like Mistress of All Evil. But yeah, they're so great. I recommend you check them out if you haven't already, especially if you like Disney and the Disney villains. And our last category is Best Contemporary I've read this year, and I decided to give it to Eliza and Her Monsters by Francesca Zappia. So I feel like I've talked about this on my channel before, I'm not sure, but basically we're following our main character Eliza, who is this web creator for this web comic, and she's super popular. Everyone loves her web comic. Like, there's even fan fiction that's written about it, and one of the most famous fan fiction writers for her web comic actually comes to her school, and well, Eliza is struggling when it comes to keeping her identity a secret because no one knows that she's a creator behind this web comic, and it's just following her as she gets to know this new person and her relationship with her web comic and her identity. And I just thought that it was so great. I cried and I loved it. Like, it is one of my favorite books that I've read this year. So that's it for the best and worst books that I've read this year. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys read this year, and I would love to know what the best book you've read this year was and also what the worst one was. I want to get new recommendations, and I also want to know what to stay away from in 2019. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure to give this a big thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe if you're not already, and I guess that's it, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.